Thank you for the question. Is why don't First Nation communities with schools have a higher standard of education than the non-Native communities? The biggest concern I see is the equalization of funding for tuition per student. First Nation students on a First Nation school territory would receive roughly $4,700. Their counterpart in the provincial boards would receive upwards around $7,200. So that's a big gap that you hear about, and with this gap, you will see some school buildings will be in poor shape, causing mold, drafts, and in turn, this would cause students getting sick and missing school. Teacher salaries is another big issue. They wouldn't be paid as much as probably their counterparts, and some of them would have to travel in remote communities, island communities, so you'd have a big teacher turnaround. And then the other extra activities, I think, to help students enjoy school, like sports, music programs, different student body clubs, to help after school activities for students is also another big obstacle. You know, it's probably a big piece missing in the lives of young students. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit on the education. Thank you.
Ane Bozo, Keith Norton is Nikos, Gimon Dow, Curve Lake and Dunjipa. It's an honor this morning to answer some of the questions that were asked last night during the webcast. And I have the opportunity this morning to address one of the questions that was asked. We want to keep in mind how we got to where we are today. And we also keep in mind, before I get to the question, is that we were a governing body at one point in time in our history. We were the first government of this country. Therefore, the trials and tribulations that we have been over, the struggles we have had in the past, we are trying to come back to where we once were. And we are on the road to that. And this is one area in which we can begin that process. As we are aware, and you may be aware, the Union of Ontario Indians, as an organization, is developing a Chinooks-Nagawin, Anishinaabe Chinooks-Nagawin. And that Chinooks-Nagawin basically outlines the operation of the organization throughout the territory. But we as citizens and advocates of our communities has the same responsibility to develop our own Chinooks-Nagawin that suits our ability. Now, one of the questions I believe that was asked was, I would like to know if those communities that have constitutions or self-governing can be looked to for their expertise. I would encourage anyone, if they do need assistance in developing their Chinooks-Nagawin, by all means approach those who have been involved with self-governing government or who have developed their own Chinooks-Nagawin or constitution to assist you. But keep in mind, your community is the one that will develop your own Chinooks-Nagawin, your own constitution. The experts will come in handy when it comes to editing or when it comes to laying out your Chinooks-Nagawin if you do need the help. But do not hesitate to ask if assistance is needed. I think we will go a long, long way if we work together to develop this process so that our communities can move forward. We are tired of being governed by another government. At most times, none of them have ever set foot on a First Nation. And those are the ones that are developing the laws for us. So folks, Anishinaabe, put one step forward and begin this process of developing your own Chinooks that will help you in governing your own community. It's a guideline in which additional parts of your governing can take place. You can make bylaws or any other type of laws that pertains to your Chinooks. But for what time it takes, deliberate, choose wisely what you want to have within your Chinooks. And again, if you do need expertise in developing your Chinooks, do not hesitate to get that assistance. And the last point, get your community, your Adbed, your members of your community, First Nation members, to help you in developing what they want and how their community wants to be governed. So thank you very much, Miigwech, keep it. You all have a very, very nice summer. Miigwech.
Question I got is, can you explain what discretionary powers the youth, elders, and women's councils will have and won't have? What about a men's council? Anyway, the discretionary powers for any group, I believe, should not be looked at as powers per se. Maybe the groups, I have to get my glasses. Groups through terms of reference will guide their roles and responsibilities. And I think they would have different authorities along with those responsibilities. And I'll go through each one. As for example, the youth, they should be the group that learns, as they're young people, and they carry forward the teachings as they learn principles, ceremonies, and have that responsibility, when they get older and grow. The women traditionally have responsibility of taking care of water, as there are many different waters, on Mother Earth, and also there's many different waters in our bodies. So when we look at our women, they have the power to give life, and they give birth. So that is bringing life, and then nurturing that life to be Anishinaabe and all that we bring forth with our women. The elders, having gone through life, learning practices, learning and practicing and teaching our culture, our language, and all the relevant issues that teach us and lead by examples, to assist in our disciplinary actions at times, and be there to guide whoever asks in a respectful manner by offering sema and other ways to get them to be involved. As for a men's council, we should look at that issue too. I was one of the guys back then. We were talking about trying to get a men's council going, but we couldn't get it going for whatever reasons. But similarly with all the other groups, they should have some involvement, because not all men are involved. Not all men are chief, like the women or elders. We're just a part of a system going forward. That we're in developing our Anishinaabe nation and looking at all our constitution that we're developing and our laws and developing from the laws that we have, you know, the principles and all the teachings that we have. Oh, Miigwech.
A question has arisen in terms of, this has been posed by one of our band members. They wanted to know to what extent will our constitutions be recognized by the federal and provincial governments? And those are really important questions, because I think, first of all, the whole process of enacting our Anishinaabe Chinaac-Nagewin is a real important step, I think, in letting the world know that we do have our own constitutions, and we do have our own sets of values and laws that we abide by, and and so in that respect, you know, there may be governments out there, including federal and provincial governments, that may not necessarily agree with everything that's in our constitutions. For example, when you look at the lawmaking powers that we set out within the Anishinaabe Chinaac-Nagewin, we say that as a matter of our inherent right, we have the inherent right to enact any laws for the betterment of our people in order to preserve who we are as Anishinaabe people, our customs, our cultures, and our traditions. And so, you know, there may be other governments out there that say, well, you know, there's Section 91 of the Constitution Act Canada, there's Section 92, and that is only that's the only legal basis for the exercise of lawmaking powers out there. We're simply saying through our Constitution that, you know, we don't necessarily agree with that. We've always had our own inherent right to enact our own laws, and our constitutions, including our Anishinaabe Chinaac-Nagewin, will be a reflection of that very principle. And in terms of how that fits into the broader Canadian political fabric, I think it's it certainly, you know, is a piece that could certainly fit within the framework set out at Section 35(1) of the Canadian Constitution, which basically, you know, says that the existing Aboriginal treaty rights of the Aboriginal peoples of Canada are hereby recognized and affirmed, and we're simply saying that as an aspect of that provision, that includes the right to govern ourselves and to enact our own constitutions. And it's certainly in line and consistent with some of the thinking going on in the international community vis-a-vis the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples to self-government, and Canada recently being a signatory to that.